When a series like Zelda becomes so popular, there are always bound to be imitators. In honor of Zelda Month, this is the story of those games.
So here we are in November and there's no new Zelda game to promote Zelda Month with. Not a single Zelda game has come out since my last Zelda Month video that I could tie this video into. So, what are we doing here? I don't know, actually. Bye, I guess. Okay, I'm kidding. Please, come back. What we're here for is to show appreciation for the Zelda series as a sort of pseudo-genre of its own. Similar to how a few months ago, my friends and I got together to pay homage to the Metroidvania genre. Unfortunately, there's not a defined genre name that I know of for this type of game, outside of just calling them Zelda clones, so I guess that's what we're going with. Let me know in the comments if you have something better. I mean, this video is already going to be made by that point, so I'm not gonna change it or anything, but hey, everyone else can just make up words these days, so let's try to define the genre of games that takes inspiration from Zelda. Why not? We're gonna get onto the list in just a minute, but first, a few guidelines. I've brought some friends along with me again this time, and what I told them to do is to basically take a game and review it, sort of, in the context of the Zelda elements it contains. And I'll be doing the same with the other games on the list. There's a much looser definition here than there was for the Metroidvania games, though, as Zelda has evolved a lot more over time. Between the top-down 2D entries like Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, and the 3D action-adventure games such as Ocarina of Time. There's also some unique options in between that don't quite act like the others, such as Breath of the Wild, with its open world and non-linear storytelling and lack of traditional dungeon structure from other games. That's why all the games on this list will be defined more so by which game they're most similar to, rather than just how they fit into the genre of... Still stuck on Zelda clone, y'all. Sorry. Another quick guideline is that I wanted this to be a fairly modern list, so it won't include anything before the 6th generation of consoles, since there were a lot of shameless Zelda clones back in the NES, Genesis, and SNES era, when it was first becoming a popular thing to capitalize on. The more modern games, for the most part, take more creative liberties, which makes them more fun to cover and compare. Also, before we start, keep in mind that there are a lot of games that could have been on this list. These are just the ones my friends and I wanted to cover, so with that in mind, let's start off with a pair of honorable mentions on games that aren't quite unique enough to make the list, but deserve some recognition. I'm going to share a few words on a game that's far from the top spot, but still is deserving of a shootout. Shout-out. Let's talk about Shotgun Legend. There's not much to grab onto with this game aside from the obvious Western parody of the original Zelda game. Artistically, it's very similar, as you explore an open-world, top-down map and take on dungeons in order. Once you actually find the next dungeon in order, that is. It does have some fun takes on classic Zelda items, though, down to the titular shotgun instead of a sword, which has a sometimes frustrating splatter shot, but also means you can do some cool, hit multiple enemies without really meaning to type thing, which, mixes it up a little bit. There's also dynamite in place of bombs, and more, as well as some creative enemies and uniquely creepy dungeon bosses. If you told me this was an official ROM hack akin to the BS Zelda game, I'd believe you, but no. This is actually a fairly modern Steam release that just wears its inspiration on its blue-collared sleeves. The fact that there's absolutely no knockback when you get hit can lead to some frustrating moments that make this game feel more dated than it is, but there are some modern conveniences, such as being able to toggle through equipped weapons without going into the menu. For the most part though, this is just a clever thematic send-up of where Zelda all began. And honestly, that's enough to get it a minute or so of time in this video, especially since it's a blatant ripoff that's also got a lot of creativity put into its dungeons and world design choices. Next, let's kick it over to my friend Pinstripe Paragon. He's a huge Sony fan, so it made sense for him to cover this PS3 exclusive that's also a blatant Zelda clone called 3D Game Heroes.
So this game is, I wouldn't say underrated because the scores were very good, but not a lot of people seem to know about it. This game was published by From Software. For those of you who don't know, that's from Dark Souls. Very similar to Legend of Zelda, Final Fantasy Adventure, but it kind of gives a Dragon Warrior vibe at times. There's a whole bunch of different items and stuff you can use. It's basically, instead of 3D Game Heroes, I should just say 3D Legend of Zelda. Original 3D Legend of Zelda.
Now on to the actual list. We're going to start off with another game that's more of a blatant rip-off of Zelda than an homage to the genre, but it still has some unique things and some pretty neat elements, especially when you consider that it started as a mobile game. Yep, it's time for Oceanhorn. This game has gotten some hate, especially on Steam, for being a kind of boring and generic knockoff of the Zelda formula. And I understand where those complaints come from because it's not the most original idea in the world, and it plays a little slower and clunkier than I'd like, but it also has a lot of charm and does enough to set itself apart that it's worth at least acknowledging on this list, even if it won't exactly make history as a game changer for the genre. At its core, it looks like a more traditional top-down Zelda take on Wind Waker, complete with taking a boat between islands full of puzzles and mini-dungeons. But given the production value and that it started as a mobile game, I think equating it to Phantom Hourglass on the DS is much more accurate. And hey, it's better than that game. Come at me, haters. The quote-unquote Zelda elements of this game are pretty obvious. You play a kid tasked by a relative to take out the ominous evil force, and to do so, you get a hold of a sword and a shield and go out on a quest to get all the MacGuffins needed to reach the evil, living forest creature known as Oceanhorn. Along the way, you find new items and abilities that help you get through puzzles and take down enemies. Even the items themselves are fairly derivative, with bombs and bow and arrow being the main staples for a lot of the dungeons, but you do eventually get some more unique magical weapons that give this game some personality. The combat in the game feels fairly simple, since this originally was a mobile game, but enemy patterns are never complicated enough to make the combat annoying, and there's actually some pretty clever puzzles in the game that scratch that Zelda itch whenever the game starts to feel a little samey. This is a game that's definitely more clone than inspired by, so to speak, but it's still fun to play and actually does a good job of encouraging the player to explore by hiding the location of certain secret items and upgrades on islands that can only be accessed by talking to the person that knows its location and marking it on your map, which, I mean, is still more interesting than just sailing around looking for a fish with a brush. Add that in with the gimmicky but engaging achievement system that encourages you to mix up your playstyle in order to get rewards, and you have a Zelda clone that plays it safe, but is no less worth your time because of that. Next, my friend Thomas, who runs the Charge Shot site I do work for, is going to take over and cover a more stylistic and non-linear game in the genre. Many interviews with the developers called out early Zelda games as inspiration though, so it's still a fitting inclusion. Go on and talk about Hob, Thomas.
Hob is a 3D adventure game made by the now defunct Ruined Games, makers of the popular Torchlight series. Hob is a beautiful game that easily catches your eye. The design of the player character is intriguing with their robe, piercing glowing eyes, and giant robot arm. The way the grass moves when you go through it, the camera movements showing the scale of the underground caves and the vistas above. The interactions your player character has in this world are unique as you explore deeper into Hob's world. This blends together for a beautifully artistic motif throughout the game. As for gameplay and combat, you have your 3-hit combo as you progress with your currency and collectibles. You can unlock new abilities, such as dashing behind characters. Some encounters can be quite difficult to approach, whether they're hard-hitting enemies or just being outnumbered. In this game, you need to slow down and calculate your approach before jumping into battle. What makes this a Zelda game is that it has an overworld layered with dungeons that completing them progresses the main game. The major flaw I have with Hob, at least so far, is that the dungeons are simple. I don't feel like I'm figuring out solutions to puzzles, or so that I'm just going an already beaten path that has been laid before me. This doesn't make it a bad thing, I just wanted the dungeons to be a little bit more puzzly. Hob is more guided in the dungeons than what I would have preferred. There are also hidden collectibles throughout the overworld that boost your health, sword pieces, and energy and more. I would compare this mostly to the first Zelda game because the overworld exploration is much more interesting than the dungeons themselves. However, in this one, you can cut the grass, just like future Zelda games. In the end, I would recommend checking out Hob, mostly for its design and exploration, which is why I come to Zelda games in the first place.
Next is a game I always tried to enjoy ever since it first released on PS2, but for some reason it just never clicked with me until recently when I saw just how much of a Zelda clone this game really is, while still doing a lot of clever things to make itself stand out. Let's spend some time now praising the sun, so to speak, with Okami. A lot of people have praised Okami over the years for its beautiful art style, serene music, and creative paintbrush mechanic, so I want to focus mostly on why it's on this list specifically. It's fairly easy to see the comparisons to Twilight Princess, in particular, with the wolves controlling fairly similar in each game, but it's the atmosphere of the game that strikes me most. The whole concept of this game is that the sun goddess Amaterasu goes out on an adventure to find her full power set and unleash it in order to restore peace and sunlight to a land scorned by evil and darkness. If that's not the most Zelda of Zelda plots, I don't know what is. And when you add in the fact that shadow beasts close you off in traps that force you to beat them in order to move on, and after you rid the whole area of these monsters and restore the missing element to the specific region, the area is rid of darkness, you really start to see how much it all sounds like the Twilight Realm sections of Twilight Princess. This is made even crazier by the fact that they only came out like 7 months apart from each other. Guess it was just a good year for playable wolves. But I digress. The gameplay of Okami really is just like a stylized Zelda game. Each area you go to, you receive a new brush power that gets you access to new places and the ability to solve more puzzles. There's admittedly less of a focus on combat and big boss monsters in this game's versions of dungeons, but it's still a solid action platformer with a strong puzzle focus and an item progression system. The key difference, really, is that you don't equip your items in this game like you do in a majority of these... Zeldarts? Is that anything? Like games that aren't Zelda? No, that's stupid. I'm stupid. Anyway, I thought about making a requirement for this list be a HUD with item slot shortcuts on it, but that felt too limiting since there's a lot more to a Zelda game than its HUD and item management elements. Plus, in this game you do still carry all your equipment around with you, and you technically equip your abilities, so to speak, by drawing specific symbols that activate that ability, so, I mean, it's close enough. But Okami very much stands on its own. I'm not trying to just denigrate it to a Zelda knockoff. It's so much more than that, and is one of the most unique entries on this list. But it's also a game where, as I played it to get footage for this video, I just couldn't stop seeing the comparisons. It almost made me forget that I don't actually like the wolf sections of Twilight Princess, because this game makes being a wolf so pleasant by comparison. In closing, Okami is an objectively better game than Twilight Princess. Fight me. Now we're gonna stay in the 3D adventure game realm as I kick it over to my good friend Epic Hedgie, also known as Danny from the popular Swedish YouTube channel Mustaschstick. I probably said that wrong. He's here to cover another game I always respected but could never really get into myself, Beyond Good and Evil. Mustaschstick. I don't know.
Is this a Zelda game? No, not really. But it has a lot of similarly things. I can't do English, by the way, if you don't know me. I'm not English speaking natively. But I will do my best to do some comparisons here. Main character in Beyond Good and Evil, you play as Jade. Green clothes, green lipstick, and green eyes. So she's super green, alright? That's her thing. Go green and all that stuff. But as you see, I put out some pictures here. You can see, like, you have little heart things, you have little item things, and, you know, it's not really Zelda, but sure, you have little heart things. So give it a little check mark there. We have a check mark. We have 2 points that, you know, green per main character, and we have hearts. So, you know, 2 out of, I don't know. And now it's like secret languages, and let's say that's also a thing they do in Zelda, because why not? So 3 checkpoints, good. And here's a friend! Way! Yay! It's Paige! Our best friend that uses farts to attack sometimes later in the game, which is hilarious. Anyway, we beat it up and we get like a little ball. We get a magic ball. And this is 100% like Zelda. You know, you beat up a boss, you get a stupidly awesome treasure. At least this is more of a value thing. You sell it for stuff, you get more stuff, and you upgrade stuff, which is pretty neat, I would say. And, you know, so that's the Zelda thing. Put a little more check mark there. And here is Navi of the game. Maybe, but it's like, he's annoying as Navi. Super annoying, talks all the time, so you know, check mark. I'm an annoying companion. Great. I actually thought this game would be like, oh, you're gonna fight a lot of stuff. But no, you actually go around crawling. You're crawling through vents and stuff. And you're going around the enemies and like throwing discs at them and photographing them and trying not to, well, be seen by them because they're dangerous. And now I like avoid them at any cost. Which is pretty cool, actually. I never thought it would be like in this kind of thing in the game, but I really like it. And also, yeah, we have a boat, which is pretty cool. You can upgrade it a little bit, and you can get more stuff for it, and you'll go faster and shoot stuff, and it's really useful, and you really need to do that, otherwise you can't progress. This game is smart! Now we're gonna get to the most fun part in almost any game, the boss battles. And I really enjoyed it in this game, because in this game, it's basically some kind of mutation monsters based on this eye thing. So it's really like a Zelda-esque thing. You see like, oh, that's the target, let's hit that target. And then you hit the target, and sometimes they die, and sometimes it's like more hits, and then you take the eye and you sell it and upgrade stuff, which is pretty cool. So let's say, is this a Zelda game? Sure. We have about five check marks. Yes, it's a Zelda kind of game. It's like a Zelda game, but most games are if you go at it this way. But I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was fun.
I'm gonna shift us back to the 2D plane now with a modern homage to the classics. A game that's deservedly picked up a lot of popularity since its release on a Nintendo console, where fans always thirst for more Zelda. And, fun fact, this is the game that originally inspired me to compile this list in the first place. I'll stop burying the lead and introduce next on the list, Blossom Tales. Oh, Blossom Tales, you know exactly what you are and you relish it. For those that don't know, this is a charming little indie title from Castle Pixel Studio, and they make it very clear that Zelda is their full inspiration for this game. It feels like a Link to the Past parody, mixed with a few scoops of passionate fan-level design and originality, as well as a dash of female empowerment, as the protagonist of the game, Lily, is seemingly the only competent person in the whole kingdom of Blossom. Though that's largely because her grandpa is actually narrating this whole story, allowing Lily to affect certain elements of how it plays out, and therefore giving the player chances to choose which outcome they'd prefer. And the storytelling element adds to the heightened experience of the whole world, where no one really talks like real people, and the environments never seem quite realistic, because they're molded by the ideas of a child and told by a probably senile old man. It feels like the studio is using this concept to tell their own unofficial Zelda story through the guise of original characters, and while that story isn't terribly long, it is a lot of fun, even if it sticks a little close to traditional Zelda conventions, and I'd like to see a sequel play with its own world a little more. There's a lot of really creative puzzles in this game too, but each one is reused quite a bit throughout, and each dungeon basically just has a few different puzzle types that just ramp up in difficulty more each time you experience it, so by the third dungeon the pattern of puzzle room, enemy room, item room, repeat becomes a little predictable, but the important thing is it never stops being fun. The same is true of the items, which are all traditional Zelda fare, though there are some unique puzzle mechanics you use the items for that help them feel more fresh than they would otherwise. Ultimately, this is a Zelda-vania? Nope. Ultimately, this is a Zelda clone that doesn't feel the need to reinvent the wheel. It just lampoons its inspiration extremely well, while also acting as a sincere love letter to fans that want more top-down adventure games in that style. And dang it, this fan feels very loved. And now back to the 3D realm with a more atmospheric entry from my good friend Rue, who I apparently should have used for the Metroidvania video instead, given his recent run of videos detailing the Castlevania games in order of story. Whoops. But he's brought along an equally moody and gothic take on the Zelda clone genre, with Darksiders.
I don't think I have to introduce you to one of my favorite Zelda games, Twilight Princess. This game is considered as one of the best games in the franchise, and even now, 12 years later, people are still talking about it. Well, I'm talking about it now. But where am I going with this? Twilight Princess is often cited as one of the darker and more mature Zelda games. What if I tell you that there is an even darker Zelda title out there? One where Link becomes a horseman of the apocalypse. Well, that's not exactly true, but just like Twilight Princess, Darksiders is considered as a dark and more mature game. And those are not the only similarities these two games share. There are reasons people call this game a Zelda clone, and I don't agree with that. But why don't we take a look at Darksiders together? Darksiders tells the story of one of the horsemen of the apocalypse, namely War. After being wrongfully accused of starting the apocalypse, War roams an open, post-apocalyptic world to prove his innocence. Alright, a lot of games have an open world to explore. That doesn't automatically make it a Zelda clone, right? It's not like War got a shadowy, wisecracking sidekick that follows him around doing all this.
Let's lay down a few ground rules. Until this is over, you're a dog on a leash. I say bark, you bark. And if I have to kick you, you'd better not bare your teeth.
Oh, he does. But where Link has a horse to explore the plains of Hyrule, War has a horse too. But his horsey is on fire. Oh, and the fast travel system is different. Where you have to unlock portals in Twilight Princess, you'll have to unlock different looking portals in Darksiders. Okay, that sounds pretty similar, but does that already make it a Zelda clone? Let's just move on. Venturing through dungeons, solving puzzles, collecting new items, and fighting giant, thoughtfully crafted bosses is a mainstay in the Zelda series. But Darksiders is different. Yeah, okay, you have to travel through dungeons and collect new items to progress through them, and you may have to use said new items to defeat the boss of the dungeon. But it's different, because it's really bloody. It doesn't help my case that you also have to use said new items to further your adventure in the overworld map. Look, War even got a hookshot. That's a little bit on the nose, isn't it? Okay, Darksiders can be called a Zelda clone, but that's not a bad thing, is it? The Zelda franchise shaped the way games were made and continue to do so to this day. A lot of us grew up playing Zelda games, and in return, we were shaped by them too. I like to think that Vigil Games wasn't trying to rip off Twilight Princess or the Zelda franchise in general. I see it more as a tribute to the games. And there's one thing Darksiders doesn't do, which Twilight Princess does. This whole business about Link changing into a wolf to progress through the game. Darksiders doesn't do that. There is no way for War to shape his form to help him progress. Oh, son of...
And here we are at the number 1 spot. For the most part, numbers on this list have been fairly arbitrary, just so that I'm dividing up the video evenly between my friends and I, but the next game is number 1 for a reason. Because I know it'll make a lot of people mad, and that makes me love it even more. That's right, it's Star Fox Adventures! Too much? Cut to the video. Those of you that have been with me for a while have had to put up with me gushing over this game plenty already, but come on, it really does fit this list. Does it deserve the number 1 spot though? Yes, absolutely, don't question me. The Zelda-style elements of this game are honestly the best things about it, while the shoehorned-in Star Fox sections almost ruin it for me, since I've never been a huge Star Fox fan anyway, and they're just really bad. Whenever Fox is back on the ground, though, beating up dinos and taking names, it's a lot of fun. It's hard to say which Zelda game it's most similar to, honestly, because the dungeon areas aren't the biggest focus of the game, but it's also fairly linear and takes a lot of its gameplay inspiration from Ocarina of Time, so I lean towards that one. There are still temples Fox and new character Crystal explore, and MacGuffins to collect that get them one step closer to the end of the game, but it's also a more traditional adventure game where you warp from area to area, clearing out all the side quests and collectibles in each place. But You've got hearts, a magic meter, a weapon with cool abilities, and even a HUD with equipable items, which I mentioned isn't required for the list, but certainly adds bonus points. Oh, and Slippy is definitely this game's Navi. Actually, just that comm unit in general. I regularly forget this is a Star Fox game until those annoying guys pop up and explain something. I still wonder what this game would have been if it stayed as Dinosaur Planet, but it's just crazy to me how well Fox's moveset meshes with Zelda's gameplay style. Everyone else just wants a worthy follow-up to Star Fox 64, but I legit want a sequel to this game. Picture the same gameplay style, but in a No Man's Sky-sized universe and Breath of the Wild levels of exploration freedom. Man, I just got myself hyped. We need to end this, because I don't know anyone that can make this game I just made up, and it's making me sad. So, there you have it. We've detailed 7, technically 9, very strong games that take inspiration from the Zelda series while still having an identity of their own. So, if there's any of these on this list you haven't played, please give them a try and let me know what you think. And, as always, if there's any grave omissions you can think of, feel free to share them in the comments and I'll probably agree with you because I actually cut quite a few things from this list initially and I could have easily done 10 or 20 more, but wanted to focus on the ones that were most important to us, the ones making the video. Obviously, if I had gotten other people involved, maybe there would have been other games in the list, so you've really only got yourself to blame for not being part of this project. Sorry, that wasn't scripted. And before anyone asks, how was this a Zelda month video when it wasn't even about Zelda games? Well, this is a video I've been trying to get made for like 8 months, and the later it got, I just decided to thematically tie it into Zelda month, so there you go. Any other questions?